This is Alan Armstrong, and I'm Allison Van Diest, and we're glad to have you here to talk about how my company, Blackbaud, has worked with Alan's company to launch an Agile CI program, and we're in the very dawn of it. So hopefully it's something that y'all can consider and maybe implement pieces and not be very far behind. And next year we can all talk about how far we got and what we've done with it. So this is my second SCIP. How many folks it's your first? Awesome. That's so exciting. I remember one short year ago, my first. And of those that is their first SCIP, are you sort of new into this field? Are you changing fields? Or this is just the first time you're lucky enough to come? For me, I was a career marketer already, had been 15 plus years, and in the marketing profession at Blackbaud, several software companies, but for the longest stint at Blackbaud, the company I work for today. And we are a primarily software company. We also provide services, and we're the largest provider specifically to nonprofits of software that powers the social good, we call it. So we have fundraising solutions and financial and marketing and a variety of things. But I've been in marketing all these years, and just about a year and month or two ago, the vice president of corporate strategy and business development approached me to see if I knew anyone that would want to take on competitive intelligence, which I was like, never, because that's a thankless job. And he persisted and finally revealed that the CEO and he had talked, and I was probably the right person for this job. And I held pretty firm because we had several incarnations, as I wrote here, the fourth incarnation of CI, of competitive intelligence at Blackbaud prior to me. Spoiler alert, I took the role. But when I started, it was very much a corporate strategy role, the ivory tower. And I didn't want to be that because as a practitioner and person in the field that had been working with sales, definitely understood that it was not very useful what they were producing, at least for everybody in the building. It certainly probably helped the C-suite, but I felt the pain of not getting good CI where I was sitting. So the second incarnation was the library producer, which I didn't feel was the right fit for me. It's not in me to probably research and write all day long, but also having sat in the seat I was in, I knew my company wasn't mature enough necessarily to digest all of it. Which led me to not wanting to be the spoon feeder, because as the marketer, they knew me as somebody that would give them things to sell with, and I didn't want to just give them CI to sell with, because I knew that that would be a very short shelf life, and we wouldn't actually change the organization the way we needed to make the whole sales organism more successful long term. And the person right before me had been an ex-salesperson that was very successful, so I also knew I wasn't a sales ninja, and I wasn't going to just be able to come in with no library of artifacts and no strategy and just be able to help them sell better, because that was not my background. So I had to figure out what I wanted it to be if I was going to take the job. And what we settled on is something that SCIP actually helped inspire, and probably something that y'all see in your more mature competitive intelligence organizations, but kind of a three-pronged approach. I wanted to make sure that I was certainly gathering information and analyzing it, and then also helping people understand what to do and say about it, and also then ensuring that we were acting on it and not just spinning what we learned about the market and how we could react to it. So obviously with one person, that's a pretty enormous job, so it was important to find some partners to do that. The information gathering and analysis, I'm lucky enough to have my friend from CI Radar in here. He's helped us with that part a lot in terms of the large-scale information that we think through. And then my friends here from Eigenworks really helped us mature a lot in terms of the type of information that we got from our buyers. And so we started down a path where Alan will talk to you a little bit about it, and then got to a point very rapidly. Like I said, it's been one short year where we're ready to turn it into an even more robust program. So we'll come to that in just a few minutes after Alan introduces himself and his firm and what they specialize in.
Awesome. Yeah. I'll say something first about Allison. When you told me the story, Allison, it was, they actually asked you to be in the job, and you said, not if it's that,
yeah,
not if it's that, not if it's, and I'm not going to do those things because that's not going to have the biggest impact on the company. And I was actually I didn't tell her I was going to say this. I was super impressed that, you can actually say what you want to do, and then, you have your own standards about what that's going to be. And then the company responds, and you're in this role, and you didn't think a year ago that you would have got this far, I don't think.
Totally true.
So it's pretty cool.
I wasn't doing too badly as a marketer, so.
You were doing great, but I'm inspired by the knowing what you wanted next. Yeah.
Well, thanks.
And maybe that's a good segue into not being reactive. So I'm just a little background about myself. I'm Alan Armstrong. I'm the founder of AgilWorks. We've been in business for about 9 years doing win-loss analysis. We're doing a lot of customer success analysis now, churn, retention analysis with the whole subscription economy. My background was enterprise software. I started out at Sybase in the 90s and then went through a series of 3 enterprise-focused startups from sort of mid-stage through exit. And along the way, spent a lot of time feeling like we were reacting. The game of, I was in product management, product marketing, did some business development, sat in sales for a little while, but mostly product management, product marketing, and found that so much of product marketing happens to be sales support. Get involved. And what happens is we have panic from sales, right? And so we immediately go into kick off a project, look at a specific competitor. We're doing feature-centric comparisons. Back in the day, we would download their product and in the dark and decompile it and read all the manuals and all that kind of stuff, or scan their websites. It was very feature-centric, and really, sales is asking for this. Just give us that killer feature. Right, and what it ends up with is a very undifferentiated product, where all the products in the market are chasing each other. And so that's really competitor-centric research. And so I like changing it from competitive intelligence, which we're still talking about, to saying that it's competitor intelligence, and that's part of the picture, but it can't be the whole thing. So when I started this company, I had noticed that throughout my career, the most satisfying times in my life and the most impact that I was able to have on the 4 or so companies that I was with was when I was doing something different, turning things around and being more strategic. And so, with apologies to Simon Sinek, everybody knows the book Start With Why, right? So we just did a little play on that, and start with why. So I found in those roles that the most valuable information that we had, and also the scarcest information that we had, was information about why the buyer was making the decision. What were they trying to accomplish? And then when they evaluated 2 products, or decided to do nothing at all, right, or buy a big thing or buy a small thing, what were the mechanics of that decision? And if I could just understand the critical mass of those decisions and bring that back and codify it to my product team, my sales team, the marketing group, we could be way more strategic, way more effective. And so I started this company to help do that, and so to start with the buyer. And so reordering the wheel a little bit. And rather than starting with competitor research, we'll start with buyer research, examine a certain number of buyer decisions and find out what's influencing those buyer decisions. What are the key factors? What are the stories that we're enabling for our customers? What are the journeys that we're enabling for them? And then when we find that there are certain competitor bits of intelligence, we can go out and get just those. Right, but it makes it buyer-centric. And so that's the first shift, is shifting from a competitor-centric CI function to a buyer-centric CI function. And I like to talk about many types of buyer decisions, right? And if you just focus on decisions, you can look at, again, there's the decision at the beginning of the life cycle to buy something or nothing. There's a decision to buy your product or someone else's product. Right? That's the win-loss. That's win-loss analysis. Then there's the decision later in the life cycle to renew or cancel what goes into that decision. That would be called churn and retention analysis. You can also look at upsell, cross-sell opportunities. Who are those customers who buy more of what you've got or downgrade their service level with you, buy another one of your products or not, and looking at what works and what doesn't. But in every case, it's about studying their decisions. And so that's the first shift, really, is the shift from that sales panic-driven chasing competitors to a buyer-centric approach where instead of looking at specifically feature-centric and our competitors' products, we're actually going to start out with strategic research questions, and Allison will describe her journey in that area. And so when we start with strategic research questions, we can do a proactive job. We can turn it into a program rather than a project. We can be buyer-centric. And the ultimate goal, in my opinion, of a strategic competitive intelligence role and program is to produce differentiated products that the market cares about for your company.
Because then you don't need battle cards. They sell themselves.
That's right. I mean, yeah, exactly. Differentiation. Differentiation is really everything. So let's talk a little bit about buyer interviews. So what I want to tell you about a little bit is using the idea of a buyer's journey as a way of conducting a buyer interview. Okay, so this is the idea of, rather than focusing on your product and asking the question, why did you buy or why didn't you buy, rather understanding their journey and understanding where they were going, and in that context, understand the selection of your product. What that does is it sets a much more open table for a much more open discussion where they're much more willing to talk because you're essentially disarming them, you're focusing on them. But there's an aspect of this so that's the general idea of focusing on the buyer's journey. But sometimes I think that when we do journey mapping, too many of our journeys look like this, which honestly looks appealing to me right now.
Yes.
Like it would be a nice journey to go on. But I think most of our customers are not actually going on a Sunday walk in the park, right? And too many of our products, I think we're looking at these boring journeys that are parts that just don't matter that much. They're the Sunday drive, the stroll in the park, again, which is like kind of an attractive idea. But what I like to look for in a buyer decision, if I'm looking at a journey, is high stakes journey. Like it has to matter. It has to have success. It has to have consequences if we succeed. There has to be a huge boon if we succeed. It has to have consequences if we fail, right? And so the concept that we're trying to bring and share is the idea of the hero's journey. And so has anyone heard of Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey? So Joseph Campbell talked a lot about I won't go into a whole Joseph Campbell lecture because we could talk an hour about Joseph Campbell. The idea is that in all of the human stories for indigenous groups around the world, they have some things in common. There's the idea of a hero on a quest with all sorts of trials, allies, and foes. And I think that's a really powerful analogy to think about your buyer's journey. And if it's not a hero's journey, then it's not a journey we care that much about. If there aren't consequences of failure, we don't care. And then what is the big prize if this journey is accomplished? And we can talk about who are the allies on this journey, who are the foes, what are the barriers that are in the way, what's the abyss of potential destruction. Like these things actually exist. In fact, so many times I've heard colleagues when they're starting a new job say it's a new adventure, right? And so many of your customers, when they're taking on a new role, are starting a new adventure, and they think of it that way. So if you can engage them and understand them as a hero, their journey, the consequences to it, stakes involved, you'll get a lot better clarity on why it matters that they buy your product or nothing or somebody else's. And so there's a couple of concepts inside the buyers. We're translating the hero's journey from Campbell into buying decisions. And there's one specific part of the buyer's journey called F Delta, which is the fundamental change that they're trying to bring to their world. Okay, so if you can just focus on that, who is my hero? What is the fundamental change that they're trying to bring to their world? Why does it matter? You'll get way more powerful buyer stories. Okay, so that's the sort of basis.
Yes. So you can imagine this was pretty amazing for me as a marketer to hear this idea and to see what this documentation produced, because he's telling kind of the ideal or the pitfalls along the way of the steps we want every future buyer to take. So that was great to the marketer and me. But what I found to the now new CI professional in me was that there was something even more valuable in the buyer's journey concept. And that was, I don't know if you all have this, but does your boss or boss's boss or CEO, whomever, sort of have one or two competitors they fixate on? And they have kind of a, I don't know, Jones against them. Like there's something about them that really fires them up and is almost, I don't want to say irrational, but maybe it gets a little bit exaggerated because it starts to take on some sort of personal angle. We had that, and we also have dozens, if not hundreds, of legitimate competitors. And we do software. We cover, as I mentioned, almost every aspect of the business of a nonprofit. So in any one office within a nonprofit, we could be the market leader, and we could have 10 legitimate competitors and maybe 15 more that are emerging. It's a very busy, high-speed evolution space. And the beauty of the buyer's journey is that no one's going to argue with me if I say the customer said, or the customer-centric lens, or the buyer said. And I can start to pull together themes that a teeny little competitor that maybe we lost to one time isn't going to get anybody excited. But if I can say these 15 all showed up in these 3 themes, and you may have never heard of them before, but we better do something about it. That starts to let me have a voice that can bring things up that are without having to say so-and-so specific brand name competitor that really gets my CEO going. So that was super exciting, and we really started to change the way we approached competitive intelligence, not just to, as I mentioned, give that marketing story that helps people guide along the way, not just to point out what's important and differentiated about our solutions to help sales, but also to pull out things that are emerging or things that come from tiny competitors to start to drive change. But it still was very project-based. It was, where have we lost recently? What did somebody see in the news? What was I seeing as one person and trying to drive some research around? It felt like a lot was slipping away. And we wanted to have a way to rally around the things that really matter to our business on a grand scale, and then build a program where, just between us, we aren't just trying to do all the good parts, but also building a business case to show all the pieces we're not doing, and to try to get some additional resources and to help frame out those gaps that could be jeopardizing our strategy as a company. And so that is what we've worked together to create here. And we decided to go Agile. So how many folks work for a company that does Agile? I know you've probably heard Alan bring up Agile 10 times already in the first day of the conference.
Do you mind just defining that? Because I know it's a trendy word, but I frankly don't know what it means.
Yes.
So Agile is an approach that was actually developed in actual software development, but starting to spread throughout the enterprise, throughout the business. The idea is that the old way of doing things was more of a waterfall approach where you specified everything up front, did a needs analysis, did all the specs, then did all the design, the detailed designs, then you built the product, and then you tested the product, and then you shipped the product, right? And because that looks like this on a Gantt chart, it was called waterfall, right?
It takes a long, you might have 1 or 2 releases a year.
It takes a long time. It's a big bang project, exactly, and there's always overruns, and so much of the complexity happens at the end, which results in delays over and over. The idea of Agile is about 15 years old now.
Sure.
There's a new modern Agile framework that we'll talk about here, is to break things down into small deliverable chunks. So they always are building, they're having releases in what are called sprints every couple of weeks or every month. I mean, the idea is to shorten the cycle of delivery, continual delivery of value. So if you see people like organizing tasks on a with sticky notes on a board with lines and what are called swim lanes, they're usually using an Agile approach.
Right.
Is that a good?
Yeah, that helps.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay, sure.
I didn't really know what it was other than the engineers did it, and I knew that it got leadership's attention, to use that word, so I was more than happy to jump on it. It's not like it's an adjective that has any negative connotations, right? The coolest thing, I think, of all goes along with some of the stuff that Joe Batista was talking about in the keynote, which is it lets you fail quickly and take some of the stigma out of failing, and you can iterate and move on. And so that enabled us to do the thing that inspired me most last year at SCIP, which I sat in the room and thought, God, we'll never do this, and we need to so badly. And that was to catalog our strategic assumptions. By framing it in this Agile thing that we'll talk about in a minute, it gave everybody the freedom to actually write down what our company is assuming on a strategic level, and then understand that writing it down didn't mean that you're endorsing it for a lifetime. It meant that you are endorsing it for a period in so much long as it takes to disprove it, right? That we're all saying, well, I might not personally believe that deep in my heart of hearts, but I sure observe that the company's acting like we all believe it, and so we better have a way to talk about it, to check on it, to surface it when things start to change. And so that's what this kind of has enabled us to do. So the first step was to remove the perceived risk of assumptions, catalog them. I'll talk about the prioritization in just a second. Figure out the intelligence that we would need, and that's how the program comes into play that we'll talk about next. And also prioritize, and then encourage this culture where everyone can contribute. Because once you've written this down and said, these are the things that the company has said we believe in, we are keeping an eye on, now everyone has a kind of framework to throw their pieces of CI into the pot. Before, everybody just would email me any old thing that had a competitor's name on it, right? Now I'll be able to start to teach them to think it through in terms of which assumption does this align with, and hopefully more and more people will be in the know to understand, oh, we've already actually vetted that recently. I can actually check it out myself. If I have a question about it, we'll create more and more of a process and approach and an automation to manage all of these assumptions and the research that we're collecting along the way. So do y'all have strategic assumptions written down at your companies?
No, actually, I was going to ask you if you could
Sure.
back the slide. So are these strategic assumptions that you're making about your own company, about competitors, about the market, about
the market? Yeah, I'll tell you the whole process now.
Okay.
Because this is, to me, one of the more valuable takeaways if you don't already have this, is if you can take any piece of this yourself, because it was thrilling to me. Probably the most satisfying thing I've done in my career was to get our leadership team to agree on these and to kick this off. Of course, it will become more thrilling as we're able to actually change the business as a result. But the process, what a strategic assumption is, and I've put CEB's logo without their permission because they coached us through how to do this at the beginning, and I highly recommend the resource. It's a market force that could impact growth in our case. It could be whatever your top line business objective is. For us, it's to grow a certain % a year. And so we said, what market forces exist out there in the world that could possibly derail us? To the very good question, we wrestled with, well, should we look at things we are capable of doing internally? Are those our assumptions that we will always have strong engineering talent that can code software, or we'll always be able to hire the right trainers? That's very tempting, but the wise advice that CEB gave us was, if you focus the lens outward, it allows you to change inward more easily. And so what I mean by that is, if you say, I believe there are enough engineers that are hireable in the market that we are looking in, right? So let's just say in New York. And so then once you prove, yes, that's true, you can see them posting that they would like jobs, on different boards, and you can go to a networking forum and people are passing out business cards and asking for jobs. You can talk to recruiters. Then you can have a more objective conversation about what you're doing, maybe not correctly internally, that's hindering your ability. If you start internally, then the people responsible for that internally will say, but it's the market, right? So think about that from a sales perspective. If you're saying there are enough buyers interested in this particular product of mine and they value this differentiated feature, and the buyers are telling you, yes, we are out here and we do value that, and yet we're still not selling successfully. Now you can say, what's going on in our sales process? Where before, if you'd said, I believe, we can sell this many things, and you come to sales and say, why aren't you? They say, well, there's not enough buyers, or marketing's not doing their job, or, we don't have any references, etc. Once you break down the fact that, hey, it should be possible, it enables the conversation internally. So that was great advice they gave us. The second one is you can't have a humongous list because you can't research or monitor everything. And so what are your most critical uncertainties? We were counseled to have no more than 30. When we brainstormed, we had 45. We have, through very painstaking process, gotten it down to a dozen. And I think the shorter the list, the better, and the shorter the words on each assumption, the better, because they really do start to become kind of part of the colloquialisms of the organization, and you want people to be able to talk in the same language, so the shorter the better. So this one, to me, was the most important, and I think I kind of touched on it a minute ago, the company-wide belief that drives our behavior. So it's not necessarily that you have to convince everybody to say exactly what's in their heart of hearts and put their names and blood on the line. Give them the freedom to say, well, I personally have always thought that's ridiculous, but I know that we're all acting like it's true. And everybody can say that. It's okay, because if the organization is acting like it's true, and you're able to objectively prove that it is not true, then you're able to have that very non-blaming conversation about, all right, so why are we all acting this way? What can we change to better reflect what's happening in the market? The fourth one was advice that I got very specifically at SCIP, and I can't remember the exact session last year, but they said, go sit down with everybody that you think will be a fan of or angry about or fearful of this process, and give them a chance to give feedback early on. And it resulted in 19 hours of one-on-one interviews with managers for me, but well worth it, even though I felt broken record-y at a time by the time I had repeated the assumptions so many times. Not only did I learn from it, and we did revise them as a result, it really, I think, created a sense of we're all in this, and nobody's going to be sort of judged or hurt by this process. We all see the benefits and want to move forward. Then, of course, your executive team has to endorse it, and we found an interesting little hurdle here. The first time we were scheduled to go before the ELT, which is our executive leadership team acronym, our CEO was called away. And so we had this really interesting conversation with everybody else on the team. They were very open. It resulted actually in 5 more hours of meetings because we had to go back around and treat them at the same level. They all wanted their moment one-on-one to really dive in, which was good. So then we thought, all right, so when Mike sits down with us, it'll just be kind of rubber stamp. Everybody knows what's going on here. Nope, he wanted to have the exact same big group conversation too, which is really healthy, it turns out, because any nuance that hadn't quite been ironed out, or if he heard something that he didn't like and he was now saying it in front of everyone, made a huge difference. So I highly recommend as open of a forum as you can to get to that last, yes, these are the ones we're going to operate under phase. And then lastly, engage what Alan coined as change makers to drive the research agenda. So this is where those assumptions become everything that we're going to research and monitor and surface for anybody that drives strategy or has to make change or use CI going forward.
So what you're looking at on the board is the modern Agile wheel. So this is a recasting of the early pillars of Agile that were done about 15 years ago, as I said, and turned it into something a little simpler, incorporating what has been learned about Agile over the ensuing 15 years, which is actually a ton. Simplified it, and then we've taken that and around the outside tried to say, well, what would that mean for competitive intelligence? And I do also want to say that I think that even if you haven't gone through the really heroic, I want to say heroic process of developing all of those strategic assumptions, that you can peel away parts of this and still use it, right?
Yeah.
And so the first part is really, I think if I push that again, the continuous delivery of insights. So one of the key aspects of Agile is to deliver value continuously. So as opposed to the big long project that takes 2 years to deliver, the idea is to always be delivering value, and ideally every week or two. That's why you get updates to Gmail or any of your SaaS products every week, because that's what they're doing. That's the only way they can iterate that fast. And with competitive intelligence, value equals insights. Just take that. You are about delivering insights, and so if you can deliver insights continuously, you're already starting to become agile. They talk in modern Agile as making safety a prerequisite. Really, what is safety in our companies? Because not a lot of us are working in manufacturing or heavy goods or any of that kind of stuff. But safety is really personal, emotional, job safety. Like nobody's going to get fired for making mistakes. The gentleman earlier, Joe, talked about being embracing failure, right, and failing fast. And we've sort of translated that into being collaborative, visible, and seeking evidence. Just a tiny example of how to create safety is if you find egregious behavior by one individual in a win-loss call, which we do hear about, that doesn't get published widely. Everything else we share widely, and then we use that information as coaching for that individual. That's just one small example, but it's really important that we're creating a culture of learning in order to enable this kind of work. Experiment and learn rapidly. Again, with safety as a prerequisite, we can experiment and learn. And we talked about, okay, let's just get these assumptions out. And let's live as though they were true. And then rather than these are not tablets written in stone, right, that we carry down from the mountain. They're assumptions that are going to evolve over time. And so Agile needs to be responsive to the emerging questions. And then they have a fourth thing here. Some people start here with making people awesome. And we want to make our buyers awesome, and we want to enable our buyers' hero's journey. We want to be as instrumental to that as possible. And we also want to make our own internal teams awesome as well. So there's a little translation of the Agile principles, and there's so much more that we could say about that. So when Allison was, really kind of blowing me away with where you were going with your strategic assumptions and what the kind of thing you wanted to, kind of program that you want to put together, this is what we put together to respond to that. And so thanks for the 20-minute time warning. That starts with the program development here, and talk a little bit about that, using an on-site workshop with the strategic assumptions as inputs and some of those change champions. An ongoing responsive hot topic interviews as part of her program, so that anytime a specific competitor blows up, there's 5 deals they want to analyze, you can just get those analyzed, get the real story behind them, and then quickly adjust and figure out what they need to do about that. And then and these would be more like sprints, so we talk about having a quarterly sprint, and so what sort of small things are we going to work on at any one time.
But instead of just being whoever's shouting the loudest or have their hand up the highest, or even if that is how we select them, all the findings start to find their way into these larger themes, even if they are just the sprint.
Yeah, exactly.
Effort.
And another term in Agile is this idea of an epic, which is a larger user story. That's the idea of epic. And so my kids use this term, epic. So the research epic is really, we have one big assumption that we want to test. Like, the incumbent is important. There's big assumptions we can talk about. And then, let's go test that and see what's really true. And how are we executing against that? So we interleaved 2 of these epics throughout the year. And then we have some optimization in here too. So we do another workshop in Q3. And so in order to turn these strategic assumptions, which Allison talked about earlier, into the research experiments, this is a whole language shift, right? Like from business plans to hypotheses with experiments. You know, that's really what Lean Startup is about. That's what Agile is about. It's about, you know, okay, so we have these assumptions, but they're not written in stone. They're things we're going to test. And we want to turn them into research questions where we actually go out to the market and find out what's actually true. And then we'll tweak our assumptions and we'll adjust our operating plans on the basis of what we learn, right? So it's that continual learning process. And so what we designed for Allison is a process of breaking down these strategic assumptions, and I call these molecules, you know, like with many atoms on them, into atomic assumptions. So we're looking for things that are a single assumption that could be tested. And then translating those into research experiments where we would actually go out and through one form of competitive intelligence or another, we'll talk about the different types, test whether those things are true, and we'll even form, so there'll be like, you know, let's say we'll emerge with 8 to 10 of those, and then let's say 3 to 5 research epics that could be prioritized and done in a continual delivery manner. Okay? So in order to do that, we could talk all day about this. So we broke it down into this atomic assumption. So we took each of her assumptions and then worked in teams. Actually, I'm going to just show the picture of the teamwork. I think it's a lot more fun. We developed sheets like this where we would they wanted to break down one strategic assumption into, let's say, 10 atomic assumptions. Okay, small testable things, and describe them on this sheet of paper. So they had these 8.5 by 11 sheets. This group of about 20 people. Or 30 people, probably. I can't remember.
More than 20.
We
20. Thought someone back out, but clearly it was an exciting thing. They all showed up.
They all showed up for a whole day. And they described the atomic assumption, and then they said which strategic assumption did it relate to. They, as a group, rated it in terms of how confident are we in this assumption, and what is the impact of being wrong, or if this assumption is false, would that be bad for us? And then what kind of intelligence would we use? We actually changed one of these to market intelligence. There's buyer intelligence, which is the win-loss stuff that we do. There's intelligence about competitors. There's market intelligence and internal fact-finding. Okay.
So let me give one of our real ones, sort of. I'll sanitize it a little bit just to really make it resonate or illustrate it a little bit better. So one of the assumptions, hypothetically, is that there are 10,000 of a certain type of available customer, like a target market of 10,000 possible prospects, and they value integration of a feature set over any other specific feature or point solution available in the market, to the point that they'll pay a price premium. And so that's very important, obviously, to our business, right? You're banking on a certain target market. You know your replace rate, your win-loss rate, and what you charge generally, so you're kind of counting on this market opportunity, and if you don't hit that, then it's hard to grow from that point onward. But how do you break that into things that you might test and or surface to share with upper management to say, wow, we were wrong, either about the number, 10,000, that would be one atomic assumption. And you would do that one by this kind of more, what we changed to market intelligence. Donor was really specific to our market, but the idea that somebody could easily count how many similar orgs are out there, and somebody should be. It costs money, so I would want to have that on my my sheet, my health check of the assumptions, to say, this one we still haven't vetted, guys. I told you it's going to cost $15,000 for someone to verify that this year, and so just so we all know, we're still believing it because we've been counting on it in the marketing plans. It's not me driving that plan, and I'm not saying I disagree, but if we really want to be very confident, then keep an eye on that one. You also have in there the buyer values this integration more than any other single point solution feature. Well, that's certainly buyer intelligence, and someone like Alan or internally, whoever's doing win-loss calls or talking to individuals, can verify that on an ongoing basis. So I'm telling my leadership, hey, look, that one's a green. That's still their favorite thing. And then you have, but would they pay a price premium? Well, you could certainly ask the buyers, but sometimes they don't like to say they pay a price premium, so you can keep an eye on what your competitors are charging, and is your win-loss rate going up or down? Have they embarked on an integration strategy themselves, which might be another way to endorse that second atomic assumption, or are they doing things totally different and now they're charging a premium and they're winning? Well, that would tell you we have to rethink a lot of the strategy, right? So breaking it into those elements gives you the tactical things to work on.
So there was the one big one,
right?
Which is, there are 10,000 of these and they will value the integrated solution over point products, which breaks down into many of these atomic assumptions, which in turn can be turned into research questions, research experiments, and larger epics.
And the neat thing is, we have 12 of the strategics. Within them, if you break each one into 4 or 5 parts, you start to notice that within 6 of the 12, you see recurring themes. And now you're able to prioritize on kind of this whole meta level what your epics should be and drive an even kind of higher level of strategy in the organization. So these little teeny pieces suddenly amount to a whole lot of exciting forward momentum.
So we had this really cool session on site where the groups were breaking out and they would each take one of these strategic assumptions and break them down into, you can see here, about 9 atomic assumptions. Okay? And then these were, all filled out, the groups filled them out, and they had a good time doing them, lots of debate. The first ones took a long time, and after that they got faster at doing them. And then we got them together and had them sort of present these to the larger group. And I think we ended up with about 40 in total of the atomic assumptions at the end. And then we, based on those ratings of confidence and impact, how confident are we in this? So there's a
high confidence,
low confidence here, axis, 0 to 5, I think. And then low impact, high impact. So here you have high impact, high confidence.
So if we're wrong, we're pretty sure we're not wrong. If we are, it would be bad, but we feel pretty good about it. Versus we're not really sure at all, and if we're wrong, we're really in trouble. So clearly, this is where you prioritize your research efforts.
Yeah, this is where everybody, and your boss, right, Jagtar, came in and he goes, show me what's at the furthest.
Yes, immediately.
Yeah, he's like, okay, so I get it. So what's the lowest? Was it like lowest? Lowest confidence and the highest impact.
Yeah.
And so we'll start. We can immediately start a research project to determine whether that's true, and that'll feed back into their assumptions and help them continue to learn and grow as a strategic thinking executive team and product team. I want to say one thing which blew me away, which was the amount of energy that this unlocked in your team.
Not my team, my coworkers.
Your coworkers.
I wish that was my team.
Yeah.
But they're sort of my virtual team now. They're all plugged into
totally on your
the board.
team. They're on your team.
Yes,
yeah,
right.
They totally are. And they were like, you show up at an on-site all-day meeting and everybody's usually got their laptops open and checking email. Nobody was checking email. They were totally engrossed in these conversations. And I heard somebody say, we are so thirsty for this kind of thinking and this kind of information, and we would be so excited, we will be so excited that we're going to actually test some assumptions instead of, receiving wisdom from on high, right? This is really about democratizing the whole subject matter of competitive intelligence. And so what we're doing now is, together with Allison, we're taking the output of that session and then we'll build a Kanban board similar to this. This is a Kanban board, something that's used in you see these in the your software shops, right, or your IT shops. And we'll have different research questions and epics that we're working on and progress them across the board. And we were just actually sitting down as we were finishing touches on this and looking at the big spreadsheet that came out of it. And Allison, you literally sort this spreadsheet and go, guess what we need to focus on? I mean, there's some synthesis that needs to be done, and there's a lot of thinking, but it really gives a framework for prioritizing research and working on the stuff that everybody agrees is most important and has the highest impact.
And not just the impact, but also in a very tactical way. When I have resources come up, I can find the projects that make the most sense, right? Like if I get an intern, I can stick them on internal fact finding. If somebody's working on a survey, mass market survey from product management and comes to me and says, you can add 3 questions, I know now to pull up my market intel list and pick the ones off the top of that. So a lot of tactical benefits to organizing
what you're.
And when somebody comes with their hair on fire, you go, okay, so which of these assumptions do you think this is higher impact and lower confidence? Let's just go back to our.
That'll never happen.
That'll never happen, right? Yeah. So we wanted to leave about 10 minutes for questions. I feel like we've we've got about 4 talks worth of stuff here, so.
I'm loving it.
Yeah, we could really, and we'll be available throughout. We'll be here through Thursday. Totally interested in talking about this and seeing if it might help you in your jobs. Before we do, so we have about 10 minutes for questions, or 8 now. You know, he talked about open innovation. I feel like we've been doing that together. Like we didn't have this program before Allison, defined her own job and decided to take on the world. And
because I was so inspired by finding my tribe at SCIP a year ago. So
yeah,
welcome everyone. I hope
So
you're
it's kind
enjoying
of
it
a
as much as
cool,
me.
it's just kind of a cool story, and so we feel like we've got some new stuff to share with the broader CI community.